Welcome to Does It Make a Sound, the podcast where we ask if an indie band pours their heart and soul into making a record, but nobody's around to hear it, does it make a sound? I'm your host, Dustin Owens, and the other fellers are here with me today, my Fall Down Trees bandmates, Porkchop Branch and Nolin McAlister. How are you, fellers?
Good, how are you?
Doing all right. In this first season of Does It Make a Sound, we're going through all of our debut album, one song per episode. The debut album is Night Terrors, and this is episode 3, Shadow. Go listen to Night Terrors if you haven't already. We think it's probably a better experience with the podcast if you listen to the record first. So go check out Night Terrors. It's on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, Tidal, all the streaming services. Night Terrors by Fall Down Trees. Of course, if you want to go ahead and listen to this episode and see if you like it, then go back. You can do that. You can listen to Night Terrors anytime. It is, from what I understand, it gets better with repeated listens, which is the kind of record I've always wanted to make. So I'm glad. I haven't had anybody tell me outright it gets worse with repeated listens. I'm sure those folks are out there too, but they're not actually giving us that feedback yet. I'm sure if the podcast gets bigger, we'll get plenty of that. If you haven't listened to the other episodes of the podcast too, we do recommend starting with episode 1, Hand of God. So why don't you go back right now, go ahead and like and subscribe to the podcast. Please review the podcast. We've joked about it, give it 5 stars in advance. You've heard 2 episodes now. This is the 3rd. You can give it 4 stars if you want to. We want like honest reviews. We don't want 5 stars only, but that does help us with the algorithms and whatnot. So if you don't mind giving us a review, we'd really appreciate it. And liking and subscribing to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. Go back, listen to episode 1, listen to episode 2, and we'll see you here in a few hours. If you want more information about this podcast or about the band in general, Fall Down Trees is on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, all of the social channels. We're going to dial that back pretty soon. It's too much work for a bunch of old musicians, so just the core ones I think should be good enough. If you have feedback about the show, too, you can message us on the socials. You can also email us at falldowntrees@gmail.com. This show is still a work in progress. We're working through some kinks and figuring things out along the way. The show will continue beyond this series, where we'll talk to other musicians, and we'll have some set break episodes, I think is what I've decided to call them, that'll pop up over the course of this season, too, where we kind of talk about different subjects and things like that as they pop into our heads. We are proud partners of Guttersville Records. Please go check us out. We're on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and YouTube, all those places, I'm sure. Lots of good music coming out from Guttersville Records. We've got an album out right now, not just Fall Down Trees, but also an album from Chromacombs and a couple of new ones coming up from Neon Dijon's, an EP, and then a really good record, full-length record from Cowlick Moon coming up in a few weeks. I've heard the initial mixes, and it is really good. So I'm also, Neon Dijon's is great too, so check them all out. And we're going to have links to all this stuff in the show notes, so you don't have to like get your notebook out and write it down right now. You can follow up with this stuff at any point in time. All right, so this is Shadow, and I do want to note here, episode length for this podcast is going to vary. Last week was Night Terrors, and there was a lot going on with that one, right? Like we'd played that live for a lot of years. The song had changed and adapted, but also like a ton of like studio trickery and all of this stuff that ended up having us at about 2 hours long. That was not the intention, but we are going to tell our story regardless of how long it takes. That's one of the advantages of the podcast. This song, though, there's not as much. We'd only played it live once, as far as I could tell. I'm sure I broke it in at some solo shows, but as a band, minimum number of like demo recordings and things, and then very minimal approach in the studio. So this one is not going to be quite as robust in that regard, and probably not as long of a runtime. We'll see. But we got plenty of stuff to talk about. Don't worry about that. As far as recording, this is the 3rd song on the album, and so it is the 3rd song that we're going to talk about in the podcast. And we pretty much recorded the album in the order that we expected the songs to be on there, but we actually recorded this 4th. So in the original running order, it was going to be Hand of God, Night Terrors, Water Finds Its Way, Shadow, and Modern Prometheus. So even though this is the 3rd podcast, it was the 4th song that was recorded. I think lyrically, this is probably one of my strongest songs. It's like the things that there's certain things that I like in a song. Not like, obviously, I can't speak too critically of my own work. I obviously thought it was good, or I wouldn't have put it out there, you know. But at the exact same time, like, there's certain elements of songs that I write that feel very much me, and like I'm kind of working at the peak of my strengths. And one of the things on this one that really stands out to me is like the visual aspect of it. And I hope that comes through to everybody else. But for me, almost every single lyric, like, I can close my eyes and I can picture it in my head. And I remember it sort of feeling that way when I was writing it too. This song is also probably like the song that I wrote that is the most special to me, like that has the most meaning and that really strikes like a really personal chord with me. I think Pegasus is like my theme song. Like, I think it's representative of me in a certain way, but this one in a much more like emotional way. And the main reason is, like, this is a song, the inspiration for this song and when I started writing this song was after Emmy Lou's second day of kindergarten. So my daughter Emmy Lou, I know that it was the second day because on the first day you walk them to their class and drop them off and make sure they know where they're going. And then the second day, I stopped at the sidewalk up there and asked her if she wanted me to walk her down, and she said no, that she had it, and then took off. And then I stood there and like watched to see if she was going to turn around and look back at me at all with any sort of sadness or anything like that. And she turned around and just gave me a big smile and waved and kept on walking. And I came back in tears and sat down and started writing this freaking song. So for me, like, everybody has a different like parenting style. And certain styles I think have changed based on the generation, right? Like the way that we were all raised and the ways that our parents looked after us versus the way our parents were raised and their parents looked after them, like it changes generationally. And this is a very like helicopter parent generation, right? Like there's a lot of like being very much in your child's lives. And that is a double-edged sword. Like, first of all, I think it's fantastic that my generation of parents, just, and I'm talking in general, right? Like this is obviously, you know, maybe 55% of people or whatever, but are very like present and active in their children's lives. But it also, the double-edged side of that is you can also make them dependent on you in a way by doing that. Like you can cause damage as well as good. And for me, one of the hardest things, like, I get a ton of joy out of just being around and hanging out with my kids and teaching them to do things and watch these, like, this is very, it's very self-centered, but like watching these little versions of myself figure things out and seeing their personalities and stuff. Like I thoroughly enjoy all of that. And to me, one of the hardest parts is like pulling away and like letting them do things on their own, letting them make mistakes on their own. Like if you know that you can stop them from tripping and falling and getting hurt, your natural tendency is to stop them from tripping and falling. But if you let them trip and fall, then they learn a lesson from that tripping and falling. And so if you can teach them those lessons in advance, that's great. But sometimes you have to like back off and let them discover and do these things on their own. And you also have to be careful not to like put your own insecurities and things like that onto your kids. Right? Where you're giving them your fears and you're causing them to have these same fears instead of approaching it in the way that's natural to them. So anyway, another thing about this song is I am a crier. I don't know if y'all have ever seen this from me.
No.
But if I, like, at the movies, TV shows, commercials, like, I am a weepy. I will cry. There's this Elton John commercial, like, where he starts out as a kid and he's, like, playing the piano and then it, like, progresses through his life and then at the end he, like, sits down. Oh, I just, like, I cannot control. I weep at that. Emmy Lou is not. I think Towns might be. But Emmy Lou doesn't like get emotional at things like I do, but she loves to make fun of me for it, right? She thinks it's hilarious. And so if we're watching a movie and this sad emotional part happens where I'm inevitably like tearing up and like getting into it. Emmy Lou like turns and stares at me with a grin on her face, waiting to see if I'm crying. It's cruel, it's mean. That's what she does. This is the song that lets me break her. She will cry over this tune. Once I kind of told her what it was about and like all of that, like it hits her in a certain way. And that means a lot to me too, right? That the same emotion that I feel that caused me to write the song and that I feel in listening to it now is an emotion that also strikes a chord with her when she hears it. So this song was finished October 2018. So I started writing it in August, second day of school. It took me until October to put the final like print down on it. Writing songs is interesting, and I think up to this point you've already gotten two different sort of versions of it. You've got the Hand of God version where I kind of like had the lyrics but adapted the music and the melody over time until I got it where I wanted, and that one took a long time. Then you had Night Terrors where I kind of had that riff down, and I kind of had the lyrics pretty much nailed down when I took them to the band, but then the band sort of adapted that song, and then it became a whole new beast on the record. This is a song where it's almost like it fell out of the sky. All right, I've heard Tom Waits talk about this, like writing songs. He's like, I don't write songs, it's just like picking potatoes. He said you just dig around until you find one in the dirt. Sometimes you dig for a really long time before you find one. Sometimes they're just everywhere, laying there in a whole clump. Only Tom Waits can be that eloquent about songwriting and potatoes.
About potatoes.
Potatoes, yeah.
That's right.
I'm trying to coin that new terminology. If y'all haven't heard it, I do have a new song out on YouTube and Instagram. It's called Slice of Pie, P-I. I put it out on Pie Day, so go check that out. But anyway, back to the task at hand. Some songs require a lot of work. Some fall from the sky. This one fell from the sky. It's really interesting that there's almost no, like, all of these songs like Night Terrors, I'm not even playing a percentage of the things that I'm finding in my voice notes, where there are these tests where I'm doing it a dozen different ways, and there are all of these demos and different versions where I'm changing all this stuff. This one, there's almost nothing. It's like it came out and it was pretty much the exact same arrangement, the exact same lyrics from the very beginning of the very first voice note that I have of the song, and it really hasn't changed a whole lot as it's progressed through the years. We've just figured out the way to get it across better. So anyway, this recording here is the first recording I have of the song. It is from June of 2019, so it was written in October of 2018. This is called Woolly Booger Demos, which I assume it was going to be included on an album for the band Woolly Boogers at that point in time. So I guess that was still with Matt. But anyway, this is just me playing solo.
And I reach for you too, but I quickly turn away. So small, so helpless, so unafraid. And the path ahead is winding and narrow, and I know you don't want me for a shadow.
All right, so from June of 2019, that was a demo recording, first recording I have of the song. And first thing that stands out to me is it's slower. There's a little bit of a change to the chorus, so it's not quite the exact same thing that I landed on later. And the solo isn't quite ironed out, like the pieces of it are there. I spent a lot of time on that solo. I spent way more time on that than any other part of the song. As a matter of fact, I think I was still changing the solo a little bit as I was recording it. But outside of that, like,
it's pretty much there.
It's the song.
Yeah. And you can hear too you were already doing finger picking at that time, but you had really started getting more into it, and now it's
a huge part of everything.
It's a huge part of everything, but I know you were doing it beforehand, but that's the first song I remember it being so prominent.
Yeah, I would say so. That song is in double drop D tuning. So what that means for most of you folks is it's in a different tuning than your guitar usually is.
What it means is I don't play in that tuning when I play.
The strings have different notes. So a D on the top, the low E, and a D on the high E. It was inspired a lot by Nick Drake and Iron and Wine. These are like constant fall musicians for me. Nick Drake, to me, I don't know if y'all are familiar, but he was a British folk singer in the early 70s. Died tragically young. I can't remember exactly what the tragedy was, but it may have been suicide. But he has an album called Pink Moon that's just one of the most haunting things you'll ever hear in your entire life. And he uses alternate tunings and this sort of fingerpick style to make everything sound different. Iron and Wine, Sam Beam, is actually from Columbia, South Carolina. Another one, a much more modern kind of early 2000s indie rock or indie folk, I guess. But another, some of it I think is regionality, where I can kind of relate to his songs in a certain way. But both of them phenomenal musicians. And so one thing about playing in a different tuning is that's probably why we never really played it live. It's a pain in the butt in the middle of a live set to have to retune your guitar. I almost never do it unless I'm going to put 2 or 3 songs together that have the same tuning.
Right.
There are a few on this record that do, like Shoot the Messengers in the double drop D, and the rhythm guitar from Night Terrors was also in double drop D, or maybe just drop D, but whatever. That's neither here nor there. In writing in a different tuning, though, it sort of breaks my natural, where my brain naturally goes when I'm coming up with a chord progression. So for this song, I didn't really know where to find all of the chords that I needed to find. I didn't know how to play them on the guitar because it's in a different tuning. I pretty easily figured out what the 4 and the 5 are, because I just had to move where I was placing my fingers for the bottom string. But any other chords like that I would try in a song, I didn't know where they were. I couldn't figure out how to make them. And so I think it really simplified like the songwriting process, but it made me focus more on the finger picking part of it. And that's where the complexity really is in the song. Anytime I get like in a songwriting funk, I'll switch an instrument or I'll switch a tuning, and it makes it like triggers something in my brain. Like it makes me think of things in a different way, and it can kind of get me out of a rut. Lyrically, the song it's like a fairy tale. And that's like, obviously I'm writing the song about my 5-year-old daughter, and those sort of threads in the lyrics, it sort of runs throughout the song. Once again, it's another song that's written in the second person. So I'm singing to you. That kind of relates back to what we were talking about with Night Terrors. Mm-hmm. So I thought about, as I was writing this song, it's me telling the story to her about when she was younger, right? So it's like I'm telling a story of her to an older version of her. I'm imagining her kind of like as an adult and trying to explain this sort of balance of fear and pride and loss that I'm experiencing in these moments. One of that opening line, like, when you awake and wipe the dreams from your eyes, that was initially wipe the sleep from your eyes. That was a cool little turn of phrase that I used there that I think sort of sets the stage for the song. Our star begins her journey across the sky. I was thinking about that in 2 different ways. So obviously it's a reference to the morning, and this is sort of a morning time scene. But also the song sort of tells the progress of the child as she's working her way out into the world alone. Then there's your eyes dance with wonder and desire. This is that, like, when I was talking about like how visual the lines are, like I can almost see this with the flames dancing in someone's eyes. It's like their amazement at the fire, right? But also like their thirst for understanding it or wanting to play with it. I don't know about you guys. I was a firebug as a kid.
Oh, were you?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
My grandma, Mimi, she was one of the sweetest women in the world. Everybody would always tell me how sweet she was, and she was a very sweet woman. But most of those people telling me that had never been chased by her with a broom, you know. And I had newspapers, I think, or toilet paper or something out in the backyard, and was lighting them on fire, and she like looked through the bathroom window and saw me out there doing it, and I could hear her coming through the house. I didn't know where to run or how to hide. But anyway. So, going into the chorus, the path ahead is winding and narrow, but I know you don't want me for a shadow. I think that's the part that hits Emmylou the hardest, and it's sort of the want. It's almost like it's like me whining because I'm being rejected, you know, in a certain way. I think it is important to note, like, especially with Emmylou, like, it's not that they don't always want the shadow. It's not that they don't always, a lot of times they do want the person standing there. And one of the hardest things as a parent is to say, you know, go on out there and give it a try. Like, you're going to have to do this yourself. Like, you're going to have to. And so it's not just that they don't want you as a shadow, but they don't want for a shadow as well.
And I you know, too, the way when I heard that line, I didn't think of it as whining. I think it's like the realization by you, the singer or the storyteller, that, you know, there are going to be times where you need to be there. They want you there, but it's. I think a lot of people, you know, just as an observer, I mean, there's a lot of people who don't know when to step back.
That's right.
And I think that's sort of a when you said that line to me, I thought it's like you had an awakening.
Yeah.
Just like she's having an awakening.
Right.
She's going out into the world, so to speak, more so than she ever has before, and will continue to do so. But you also have an awakening, like, this is something that she has to do.
Right.
And I don't need to be hovering like a helicopter parent.
And as you mentioned, like, I think that is the thing, is none of us really know when that time is to, like, step back. Like, that is the danger. Like, that's the scariest part of it, is, am I doing this too soon? But, you know, that thing when she turned around and, like, looked at me, and I'm waiting to see if she's going to be scared, and she smiles and she waves.
Right.
Like, that, like, sets you at ease, like, in a certain way, but it also, like, pains you a little bit right there. And it's, once again, it's not that she doesn't want me there, but it's just that she doesn't need me there. Right. And, like, that's a hard thing as a person too, is to know that you're not, like, necessarily needed in that way. So the next line, though, you walked away into the forest's reaching arms, which is obviously her walking away from me in that instance. But also this idea, like, once again, just so visual, as I can, like, see the edge of the forest, and I can see these, like, trees reaching down to the black maw of a trail that's disappearing into the darkness, and these limbs that look like they're reaching out for this tiny little girl as she's walking away into that spot. It's almost like, you know, monsters reaching for her or something. And where the ravens hide your breadcrumbs for a lark. Once again, like, that's kind of the fairy tale thing. What is that? Is that from Rumpelstiltskin or something? Like, I know it's from a fairy tale somewhere where the birds are hiding the breadcrumbs.
I don't remember which one it's from, but it sounds awfully familiar.
I don't know. Maybe I made it up. Who knows? But it's also like the world's tendency to sort of make life hard, right? Like, this idea that, like, it doesn't matter how much you prepare and what you work towards, like, there are these elements that you don't even see happening, and a lot of time there's no rhyme or reason to it, you know? Like, somebody can just destroy your whole world just by making a stupid mistake, or just for the fun of it, you know? And you're not, like, especially at that age, like, you're not cynical in the way we are as old people to understand that. That line, though, so small, so helpless, so unafraid. I think that's like the kick in the teeth of the whole song. Like, that's the part that you're dealing with. Small, helpless, but unafraid. It's hard to balance, like, when to instill fear in the child. Like, don't walk out in the road without looking both directions, right? Like, you have to let them know that, but also not to put that cynicism on them at an early age, and to let them have that confidence and a bravery that, you know, has kind of been worn out of you over the course of your life. Yeah,
it's telling them not to run out in the road, to look both ways, but not to stay on this side of the road. You can cross the road.
That's right, yeah.
If not, the scenery never changes, you know?
I think that's like one of the things when we as adults like look at children and we have this like appreciation for children, it is that sort of bravery and that hope that comes from a certain level of innocence. And that's a hard thing to like, you don't ever want to take that away.
Yeah.
That's the part that you wish you still had from childhood. Once again, I think as generations pass, like, you know, a long time ago, like beating that out of your children at a very young age was a very important thing or they would not survive. Now we don't like, we have certain luxuries, but you still have to find that balance somewhere, but you don't want to ruin that thing that you admire so much. All right, so going into the last verse, it starts with Once Upon a Time. It's kind of cool to me that the last verse goes back to the beginning of the story. So it's almost like the last verse actually goes back in time before she walked away. But also kind of a pining, like for how things used to be, you know, and sort of these memories. It says the mantis landed on her knee to pray. One thing that I found out when I was looking back through the lyrics from October is that it said widow. So it was a spider initially that landed on the knee. And so I wonder how long it took me to get around to the idea of the mantis, because then I get like the homonym of pray and pray, right? Like the double entendre there, which is, that's, every time I write one of those, I write it for Porkchop. Like I get this, it's like Porkchop's really going to enjoy that.
I love those. I really do.
So that was for you, Chop.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know when Mantis came to be. In the first recording, it said Mantis. I think Mantis is better. I write about, you know, people write about spiders all the time. Do you know any other songs that have praying mantis in them?
Not off the top of my head.
Yeah, me either.
So we'll just count this as the first one.
Nice. The next line, like, you ran to me, you were quaking with fright. There's like a vocal inflection there when I sing that part of the song that I really like lean into. And I did it the first time I did it. Once again, it's almost like it's a little bit of a play, but when I sing quake, I make my voice quake. So I don't know, that might be cool when you're listening back to the song, folks. If you kind of listen for what I do with the way I make my voice quiver when I get to that spot. It's not something I ever want to stand out, but I love adding like those little extra nuggets into a song. They're almost like little Easter eggs. Like maybe one day somebody will catch it and not realize it and just be like, it's like his voice quakes when he says quaking.
Yeah.
You know? You look to me to make everything all right. That kind of role as a protector that never goes away, but sometimes like it is the teaching them to fend for themselves and encouraging the independence, you know. When I did the final arrangement with the solo, when I recorded the solo demos, so the solo demos were the things that I made. This would have been November of 2022, and I sent it to all you guys, including Jonah, to like be able to be familiar with the songs when we went in to start learning them. This, what I'm about to play from those solo demos, was the complete arrangement of the song. So this is when everything was there, even the tempo. So check this out from November of 2022. This is a solo demo.
And I reach for you too, but I quickly turn away. So small, so helpless, so unafraid. But the path ahead is winding and narrow, and I know you don't want me for a shadow.
So it's almost all there,
Yeah.
right? Except for the little there at the end. It also stands out to me like the tempo is almost exactly the same as the final recording.
Yeah.
Like, you guys know me, like, changing the key of the song, changing the tempo of the song. Like, it's just so strange to me on this one particular song that there are no key changes anywhere I can find. There's no, like, the tempo's almost there all the way back as far as 2022. Like, how consistent this song stayed from the time that I wrote it.
Which is very unusual. Very unusual. Not, I don't think just for your case, but I think with a lot of writers. I mean, you know, you start with something and you tinker with it whether it's a key, a tempo, adding a bridge or something like
Yeah.
that. There's always something going on, but this was pretty consistent.
Yeah, I mean, even like the intro and the way the intro comes in and the way the song ends, like all that stuff is all there in those, and those are usually things we work out as a band. But just the quality of musician that I am, playing a song multiple times at the same tempo is not a thing that I do, right? Like, most of the time, and I mean, that first one was slower, like obviously, like right off the bat. But yeah, most of the time, like, it's not that we're testing things out. Like, we show up at band practice and we play the song faster or slower, just depending on the mood, how much coffee we've had that day,
Yeah.
what kind of mood everybody's in the room. So yeah, it's pretty wild that this one's been that consistent. So, as we've mentioned several times in this podcast, like, we didn't write these songs to fit the concept of the record, but the songs fit the concept once we had the concept in place, right? And for this one, this was like a no-brainer, had to be on there, never any kind of question about it. On the record, it lands right after Night Terrors, so we go from Quiet Hand of God into blowing people's eardrums out with Night Terrors back to the most, like, I would say this is the most minimal song on the record.
Yeah.
So it's only 3 pieces in the final recording. Water Finds Its Way is only 3 pieces, but I'm going to push it up a notch because it's an electric guitar instead of an acoustic guitar.
Yeah.
So I would say this is the most minimal song on the record. But once again, like, that's kind of intentional. Like, these emotional swings were a big part of Nights in the Shed, right? Of like going back and forth about how you're processing things. And usually when anger is like the thing that you're processing, there's a certain level of like adrenaline that comes with that rage, right? Like a sort of like a buildup, like a sugar rush. And then the thing that lands right after that is the crash, right? Like the melancholy. And so that sort of up and down aspect of this record, and it does, like, it's like a wave, but the waves get bigger the deeper into the record you get, right? So like the intensity, I guess, maybe the waves get smaller. Like there's more intensity on the back end of the record and more weirdness on the back end, but there is a constant sort of up and down wave that runs throughout. The hardest nights for me in the Shed were the nights when the kids weren't here, right? And so these are like nights where I don't have anything to do. And at this point in time, like, I'm trying really hard not to fall back on the ways of my youth, right? Like, I was a rough binge drinker when I was younger. I was wild, and all of that kind of went away when Emmy Lou was born, and I got away from all of that. And these nights, like post-divorce, kind of the beginning of all this, there was a big part of me that was like, I want to go out, I want this like social interaction, but I was also really scared of that first drink, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like really scared of that one thing. And so, like, I'm sitting here in the Shed, and like these nights when the kids are here, like, I'm occupied, like, all night till they go to bed. And they like, connecting with them was one of the few spots of joy in my life at that time anyway, like the time that I was spending with them. But that's also not their responsibility, right?
Yeah.
And like, I don't want to put that burden on them. And so the nights when they're not here, like, I reach out, give them a call, say goodnight, send them a text message or whatever the case may be. But I'm not like, I don't want to push for that extra communication. They need time with their mom too, and they need to develop their own ways of coping. And so a lot of what I'm dealing with in these moments is exactly what Shadow is written about, right? I want them to know that I'm there if they need me. But at the exact same time, like, I don't want to put my stuff on them, my fears on them, and I want to give them that sort of space to cope too. And so a lot of this is me trying to deal with that, like sitting here in the Shed bored. There's also like this understanding at this point in time, like, and I'm fortunate in the way that this has worked out, and like the co-parenting situation with my ex and all of that. It's pretty much equal time. And so, but still, like, this is a permanent life change where now I experience half of my children's childhood, right? And like, that makes all of this, like, letting go, like letting them grow, letting them make their own mistakes and deal, that makes that even harder, because I feel like I only have half of that now that I'm part of and that I'm getting to experience.
Right.
Another big thing, like, for me, and I think this is the same, and this is a part of my personality and kind of the same relationship in a way that I have with you guys, right? Is like, knowing that I'm, like, needed gives me a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes me work harder for things because I know that other people are relying on me. I'm not a very, like, competitive person, and I'm pretty self-driven, but most of that drive just comes from that. Like, there are things artistically that I just have to get out of me, but pretty much any level of like, I would just sit here and make records and ignore everything else, you know? But knowing that, like, the way that people rely on me, like, that brings me a sense of purpose in life. And it also gives me, like, in this instance with the kids, like, a sense of pain. Like, I'm the reason that they need me in these certain situations. It's decisions that I've made that have led us to this spot. And so there's a sort of duality there as well. There's guilt, obviously. I think this song and Water Finds Its Way, they both show a pining for the past, like this sort of longing for the way that things used to be. And I think that we often look at the past through rose-colored glasses, and this is a thing that everybody experiences, right? Is like, you can look back at these times and say, God, you know, I really miss when things were like that. But those songs also show, like, an understanding that change is inevitable, right? Like, a change is a thing that's coming. And in a lot of ways, it's a thing that's necessary and a thing that's healthy. And in that way, those two songs really parallel. And this is a thing that I was, and still am to this day, like, constantly trying to remind myself of.
Yeah, I'm probably going to kick myself because I hate when people use this term, but I can't think of any other way to say it. It's like the seasons.
Yeah.
You know, people say, I'm in this season of life. I hate when people say that. And but honestly, I've often thought about, there's a song by you might remember the Darlings from Andy Griffith.
Yeah, absolutely.
They were a real group called the Dillards out of Missouri, and I think one of my favorite songs they ever did is called "There Is a Time," and it shows the progression of somebody's life through seasons. You know, it talks about, you know, when it's very I don't want to say basic, but it's a very general look at someone's life. Like,
Sure.
When there's love and laughter, that's the springtime, and then the last verse is, you know, the winter storm coming in. Mm-hmm. But really, when you think about it, you know, it's a progression of, because once your season's done, these cycles keep happening generation after generation.
That's right.
And you hope that you know, what you have passed on to the generation behind you, they then pass on to future generations.
Absolutely.
And you know, something else too, not to get too deep, but you know, I mentioned,
I don't think you're going to get as deep as I just went, Porkchop. I went pretty deep.
You know, one of the things too that you talked about, I mentioned earlier, you realize where you have to let go a little bit. You know, I also think it's, you know, hearing the backstory of this, you realize that you don't need to go back to the way things used to be in your youth. Mm-hmm. Not that you're old, but, you know, in your your wilder days.
I feel it some days.
But, like, there's a part of everybody, whether your past was wild or you were, it doesn't matter. You look back and say, man, I really could go do that again.
Yeah.
And you have to, I think that's the realization too, that that's the maturation process, that you hope that you get to that level where you could say to yourself, honestly, you know what, that would be fun, but
No.
This is not this is not the right thing to do because of the things I've learned along the way. I think there's it's two different kinds of realizations. The realization in the song, and then your backstory too. There's another realization there. That kind of hit me when you were talking about it. Like, there's so many levels of realizing where you're at in this season of life.
This season of life.
Yeah, that you make your decisions based on past experience and learning, and it's really deep, man.
Well, that carries on. Like, I wrote the song in the fall. And most of that music, the fall music that I like and that I enjoy, kind of follows those similar parallels. I think it's natural as human beings in the fall to be reflective in that way.
Yeah.
You mentioned there too, like, a sense of legacy. And I think that's obviously, like, so as human beings, like, what can we do that the other animals can't do, right? Like, we can pass down information generationally to multiple people in a way that most animals can't, right? Like, you can teach, a deer can teach their children how to cross a road or how to find food, in the forest or whatever. But we can write things that carry on for generation and generation. And so we still teach our children the way most animals do, like this behavior. But one of the drives to create an album, right, is to create a similar legacy. We can go out as a band and we can play music every week, all week. And if we all die in a fiery plane crash between Greenville and Baton Rouge, which is possible. I got past the motorcycle crashing years, so now it's the plane crashing years that I'm worried about. I made it past 27. That was a big moment for me. But anyway, like, there are going to be memories that people have of the shows that we've played or whatever. Like, that'll be there, and living on in memory is important. But
the documentation.
That's right. And once you document a thing that you're really, really proud of and it's out there, like, there is a sense of this, like, legacy. Like, we've actually, like, done a thing at this point in time that carries on generationally beyond us.
Yeah.
And, I've always laughed that I'd never expect to be famous in my life, but if Emmy Lou, like, hits it one day as a pop singer, and then, like, for her 8th album, she's going to do acoustic guitar renditions of her daddy's songs, and that's when I become famous, when I'm long dead, and, I want to be the songwriter's songwriter and all this kind of crap, It's just, this is the kind of stuff, like, most musicians dream of big shows, and I'm over here like, well, I'll die poor and then be famous after I'm dead.
I think there is this dream of a lot of people when you talk about legacy, of having done something big enough that they'll write about you in history books, or you've done some deed that will be remembered with a statue or the name of plaza after you, or a street.
You fight a bear.
And when you get older, I've come to the realization that's never going to happen. So you have to have personal interaction. That's one way that the legacy's there. Interacting with people, whether it's people your own age or younger than you, sharing information, something you may have learned, or some anecdote or something, but also documentation on a recording.
For sure. I love what you said there about that, like, have you had a positive impact? And we're going to get, like, a little bit into the religious side of this record, because there definitely is a religious element and, like, a spiritual element to what's going on here. That's going to appear kind of more towards after midnight when the character's flipping the pages of the Bible. But at the exact same time, like, to me, that is my moral compass. I don't know. I feel like there's a better word than compass. In every action that you do, are you having a positive impact on the people that are around you? I think that's like a core life principle of mine that I try to live by and let guide just about every decision, that I make. And so I do think it's interesting you brought that up in the course of this conversation. But now we're going to shift out of the heavy stuff, and we're going to get back into a little bit of music. So it would have been summer of 2023. I did the official demos. So this is when I actually got out like the good recording equipment and put on headphones, and instead of just sitting in front of my phone recording demos, like I made real demos to deliver to you guys with the idea that you could learn, and this is with Jonah still in the band too, with the idea that you could learn the songs and then we would overdub onto those recordings to record them. One thing I noticed here when I actually worked out the vocal harmonies that ended up being the final vocal harmonies on the official demos, which was cool because this was a thing that we did not do. Like, we didn't know how to do these before I did the official demos. We didn't really know how to do them until we got to until Nolin gave me a piano lesson on how harmonies work. But this was one here, like right off the bat, that I realized, like, hey, this is a thing that can actually be an element of the music and not just subtract from it. So this is from looks like July 2023, the official demo for Shadow.
Once upon a time, you sat beneath the trees at play, and the mantis landed on your knees to pray. You ran to me, you were quaking with fright. You looked to me to make everything alright. Now the path ahead is winding and narrow. I know you don't want me for a shadow. Now the path ahead is winding and narrow. I know you don't want me for a shadow.
So is there anything like in that immediately like jumps out at you? I'm curious, because there's a thing in that
I know the obvious is, to put it layman terms, when you first sent it to us, my initial thought was, who are those other people? Who's that lady? And are those your kids? Did you teach your kids to sing that? It's like, who are those other people?
When did we hire the Forrester sisters?
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to know.
Thank you very much. So the thing to me is the squeaks. I don't know if that like jumps out at y'all. That is like, it makes my ears bleed. I hear it so like clearly.
Yeah.
The squeaks of my fingers sliding up and down the strings of the guitar.
Yeah.
That haunts me when I listen to that. Like, I can't imagine how hard I worked to get that out of there for it still to be that freaking present on a recording. The other thing is the end. So this, as far as I can tell, is the first instance of the whisper. So in all of the others, I just sing Shadow like a normal person. But at the very end of these demos, I went, Shadow.
Yeah,
like that.
I think it was a real great artistic move on that. In the hands of some, and not trying to blow smoke here, but there's some people that it would sound corny.
Yeah.
If they did that. If I did that,
I think it's probably debatable that it sounds corny now.
I don't know. I think on the finished product, it.
Did I use it at the end of every chorus in the final?
I believe so.
Too.
I believe so.
Yeah, and I think it just worked. Once again, it's another thing where I just did it. Like, I don't know that there was any forethought to it or anything. I think I did that in the moment of recording, where it was just like, hey, I should just whisper it right here. And then I heard it back, and I was like, hey, that actually sounds pretty cool. So there is a thing that changed. So we did work this song out for one gig. As far as I can tell, it's the only time that we played this song live as a band. I'm sure I did it solo. This has Jonah Glenn on drums. This is from the Bruise at the Square gig. So we did intend to record this with the band. So we had been working. The reason that a lot of these songs ended up at Bruise is because we had been working out the arrangements of these songs like at band practice. And so they were songs that we were working with a lot. So this is from October of 2023, Bruise at the Square in Pendleton, with Jonah Glenn on drums, Shadow.
Your eyes dance, wonder and desire. But the path ahead is winding, narrow. I know you don't want me for walked away.
So, unlike Night Terrors, where we're just like ripping the shreds off of every single instrument, on this one you can tell we're in front of a coffee shop at a fall festival. You can hear the people talking in the background.
You hear the breeze.
Yep.
Love the sax on that, Nolan.
Really?
Like a smoky, sort of bluesy sax weaving around over the top of it. I thought that was really good. It definitely has a different feel than it ends up with on the record. There's more. Jonah does a great job on the drums. They're just like holding back.
Yeah.
I think one of the hardest things to do as any musician, but especially as a drummer, is like on a slow song with a lot of space, like really dialing back what it is you're doing and still being able to keep time. And I'm going to give him a ton of credit right there.
Yeah, it sounded great.
He was being really sparse, but still like holding us together exactly where we needed to be. In the solo, I didn't play it there, but I did notice in the solo of that song, I kicked the distortion pedal. So instead of just finger picking it through, I mean, I still did the same finger picking, but I kicked that distortion pedal and came in hot. I don't know that it really did anything there. But I thought that was a really solid live version, and especially the saxophone, I thought really kind of stood out and added a whole different dimension than you get on the record. I did notice that you didn't sing the vocal harmonies, Porkchop. I'd obviously already written them for you.
No, there's as many of you you'll be surprised by this when I tell you this, listening audience, but I am not a great singer, and so there's certain songs and certain keys that are easier for me to harmonize on, and then that is not one of them.
It's not one of them.
But you know what's interesting? I'm almost positive we played a gig recently, by the time of this recording. And Nolin wasn't able to come. He was under the weather, and you pulled this out because we were looking for songs, and I actually sang the harmony on that.
Did you really?
Yeah, I wish we had a copy of that. Not to play on here, but I actually went Shadow with you in harmony.
Yep, that was one where I ran out of memory on my phone after the first set.
Yeah,
so
but,
we only got the first set.
Yeah, so I do have. I can't sing all four parts, but I can do one of them. So.
That's good. That's all you need. We really just need the one.
It's a work grotesque, man.
Look, I think, you mentioned you're not a great singer, and I agree. I am also not a great singer. I think, it is like, I think our charm is in our bullheadedness to just keep doing it regardless of any of that.
And, I think every once in a while we learn something and it sounds better.
It sounds all right.
I won't say it sounds good, but it sounds better.
We're getting there. So after Jonah left the band, we developed a concept, all right, called the dendrological method for arranging songs.
I remember this.
Yeah. Now, when I say we, I mean this is probably one of those nights in the shed where
lots of time to think.
That's right. And this is the shit that I'm sitting here thinking about. I don't even know. This is crazy. All right, so I imagined dendrology is the scientific study of trees. All right, and we're called fall down trees.
Anytime you introduce a new word on the podcast, we need like a ding, ding.
Yeah, everything relates to trees now. So what this idea that we're three people in the band, right, and we're trying to be able to play live. This was a live concept. We're trying to be able to arrange and play these songs live and still keep all of the song there. And so it's like, what does a song need to be full, to be able to get it all the way across, right? And so each song needs roots, a trunk, and branches, all right? Now, what we're trying to do, we don't want to step on each other's toes, right? So the way that we're arranging, but we also want to make sure that the songs are fully realized and we're making the most. Hey, Arlo. Arlo always likes to pop in and say, hey, that we're making the most of each piece that we have. So the roots of the song are kind of the rhythmic foundation, right? It provides a structure to the song. It provides stability. So for us in this moment, most of this is coming from a strummed acoustic guitar or a strummed electric guitar, because you get a lot of bottom end out of the electric, or it's coming from the upright bass. So the upright provides a lot of rhythm that an electric bass doesn't provide, right? We did not have a cajon yet. We did not have any sort of actual drum. We're beating on stuff in the studio to be able to record these songs. All right, then the trunk of the song is the textural element, right? It adds a thickness and a character to the tune. All right, so this is what's going to be, this is your electric bass, where you have a lot of sustain and it sort of fills up this extra space, unlike the upright, which is dunk, 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 and electric is dunk, dunk, like
right.
that, all right? Keyboards are another part of it, so I've got a keyboard here in the studio, and even though none of us are very good at it, Nolin can at least like pick out some interesting things. Finger-picked guitar would fall in here, whereas a strummed acoustic guitar is carrying the rhythm. A finger-picked guitar is more weaving in and out of everything that's going on. And then your branches are like your flourishes, right? It adds like beauty or tension or like movement to the song. So this is also like keyboards can be taken this place, right? If it's more of like a solo style on the keyboard. Or it can be an alto or soprano saxophone, or a lead guitar line, or a harmonica line. And so we don't need branches twice. We don't need a trunk twice. We don't need roots twice. We only need one of each of these elements, and then this helps us figure out what instruments we all need to be playing. I did mention this is focused more on live arrangements than recording, but this is something that we continue to think about, and as we're arranging a song that did carry through the live recordings and continues now like into live stuff, though we did kind of figure out some different ways around it. So all this is a big lead up to this is a version of us practicing Shadow. This came from January of 2024, so this is before we started recording the record, and we were trying to create arrangements for the record with a 3-piece band, but to also be able to play them live with Nolin on the piano.
Oh, God.
Once upon a time, you sat beneath the trees at play, and the mantis landed on your knees to pray. You ran to me, you were quaking with fright. You looked to me, make everything alright. But now the path ahead is winding and narrow. I know you don't want me for shadow.
Threw the whisper in there.
Yeah.
So you can actually hear that. I guess that's the upright, right? I don't know that it has enough sustain to be the electric.
I think it's the electric.
Okay, well, I'm going to go with you
Because
since you're the bass player.
there's the reason I would say that is there's some things that I can do on the electric. There were some notes there I played, messing around trying to figure out what I'm going to play eventually, that I definitely wouldn't play on an upright.
Yeah.
There was a couple of things I know I couldn't because the spacing would be too far. I'm a basic upright player, so it's if it's too far apart,
You're not going to reach it.
I use Occam's razor. Keep it close together. Simplest route.
So, but you can hear at least the EQ layers, which I thought was cool. You can hear the bass taking up all of the space on the bottom end and trying to stay rooted on the beat. And you can hear the finger-picked guitar kind of working around that. And then you hear the little plinks on the keyboard taking up the high end and kind of providing fills around the vocals. Once again, Nolin is not a piano player or a keyboard player, so all of that is just feel and ear. But I do think it adds an interesting like textural element to what we're doing.
He's also not a drummer.
He is not. But when it comes down to it, we did finally decide that having percussion is more important in most instances than trying to play Nolin playing keyboards or whatever. Like, it's also better to have everybody play in their strongest instrument when possible. Yeah. So obviously Nolin is an exception to that, or he would be playing a saxophone on every song because, it is kind of funny that, like if you think about like a football team and you're like, they've got the best running back, core in the league, and then they go out and they pass every down and you're like, what the hell are they doing? That's kind of like us with Nolin in the sax. He's like our best core unit, the best unit that we have. Nice unit, Nolin.
Appreciate you.
But we're putting him on the bench, like we're making the running backs come in and play linebacker. Whatever, I don't know. I'm struggling with that metaphor now, but anyway, that percussion is really important to have in there. So even though we dislike drummers, we don't dislike percussion. We don't much like drums, but we'll beat on stuff to make a sound. So anyway, we started recording in earnest on February the 27th, and so we did this song. We had already done Hand of God, Night Tears, and Water Finds Its Way, like the rhythm tracks. The night before we came in and started working on this, I had a really hard time. Now, once again, I'm like staying up late in the middle of the night and like stressing myself out, doing tons of takes and stuff, doing all this. But the night before this, I was kind of running behind, so it's Monday night, and I'm trying to get stuff done so you guys can come in and record on Tuesday. I could not play along with the click track to save my life. So once again, to hammer on the fact that we are not incredibly good musicians, playing to a click track like a metronome is not an easy thing for me, and I really struggled. I got better over the course of this record, but I don't hear that in the same way that I hear drums, where I don't really have to listen. I just feel them. And I actually took the metronome and switched it around so it was making drum noises to make it easier for me to do that instead of just the constant clicking. Also, the finger squeaking continued. And like, I'm in here recording, and I'm like, I can't put this out on an album with it squeaking like this. Like, it's going to drive me insane. So I did a rare thing, but also learned a lesson. I quit. Usually I just keep pushing through until I get something done. But instead, that night, I quit. And then the next day, on my lunch break from work, instead of eating, very healthy, I fired it all back up, and it worked. I figured out the final acoustic guitar mic placement. So for the rest of the record, I used this. The trick is not to create 90-degree angles. So you put the mic at a bias, a little bit off kilter when you're pointing it at the guitar, and the squeaks aren't as bad. And then I moved a mic behind the bridge. So anyway, I'm not going to go too deep into that, but that was the final way that I recorded the acoustic guitar for the rest of the record. One kind of cool thing is the first songs on this album were kind of a testing ground for the rest of the record. And so I think this is kind of where we're really coming into our own recording and figuring out how to do that. I don't think we'll fully come into our own until the next song, which is Modern Prometheus. So I got it done. Like, I got an acoustic guitar and a vocal down on the click track before you guys got here on Tuesday for band practice. And then we went to work on the bass. And so this was us all working on the bass with all three of us in the room, and me and Porkchop are like passing the bass back and forth.
Pluck and pass.
And usually the way that we did this is we like started really like complex, like trying to do as much as we possibly could, and then it doesn't sound good and it's not fitting, and we argue about why back and forth. And then we continue to like strip it down, right? Strip it back. And once we kind of get back to the most basic structure of the song, and on this one there's a lot of just like playing a single bass note on a one, right? Like, it is very simple. But then a lot of the more complex like flourishes and stuff that we were doing, we add those sort of back into the song. And then on this one, once again, Porkchop, you take the final reins on playing the bass. You just got better bass hands than I do. You know how to play a bass. And so you kind of took the thing that we sort of created together and brought it home. All right, so I've got some interesting things. So I've got this notebook that I used over the course of the recording process. You folks on the podcast, you can't see it, but it's nice. The job that laid me off years ago actually gave this to me when I started working for him. And so
severance notebook.
And it is like, it was my severance. Well, I got it before the severance, but I started writing in it after I got laid off. And that's kind of like when we started the band back up. And so every time I would open it up, I would just be reminded about how much it pissed me off that they laid me off. And so anyway, it kind of carried through, like it's gone through the whole band. I'm not great at like keeping up with it all the time. So there's like 3-month long gaps in here and stuff where I didn't write anything at all. And then it's like, oh my God, I haven't written anything in here in forever. But I also kind of used it like a journal. So not only was I writing about like the recording process and what we were doing on these days in sort of a dry way, but I was also talking about like how we were learning and growing as a band. And so when I was looking at the notes for Shadow, I came across a couple of things in here. You guys I've never shared any of this with anybody. So you guys have never heard this, but I thought you might enjoy it. It was cool to have Nolin's input here too, talking about like being in the room recording with all three of us there together. It was cool to have Nolin's input here too, not just for the ideas, but for power dynamics. I get pretty into it when we're working, and ideas flow, and I'm direct about stating them. I think it's overpowering sometimes with just two of us, and I can kind of take over the direction of the flow. With three, there's a tiebreaker that keeps me from winning all the disagreements. So what, do you guys think that's true?
Never thought about it. I think that's true.
There's a little bit of truth in there.
I definitely think it's true. When there's two of you, it's a whole lot easier to tell me to shut up. I don't do it, I don't do that intentionally, but I do get into it. Like when we were in here and like throwing ideas back and forth and like really in the heat of battle. When we went with the Guttersville guys and recorded the video for, I can't think of the name of the song. Dadgummit. It's from the 5 Year Fever Dream album by Chroma Combs. He put out a music video. It's fantastic. Go watch it. I got to do the camera work for the video, which I was really excited about. I didn't know that in advance until I got there and realized that was part of my degree, when I was shout out to Tri-County Technical College.
TCTC.
Yeah, we were radio and television broadcasting back then. What are they now? Media Technology and Arts.
Media Art Productions.
Yep, that's how me and Porkchop got so good at this thing that we're doing right now too. But anyway, so I actually gave them like a disclaimer. I was like, all right, guys, we're getting into it, and I'm going to start shouting directions at everybody, and I just don't want y'all to think that I'm an ass. Like, I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm just in the flow of things. All right, so here's the other passage from my notes from that day. I think it's one of the great things about working with Porkchop and Nolin. We all have our strengths and our weaknesses, and they balance each other out. Nolin has an amazing ear and is a powerful soloist and sympathetic accompanist. I'm creative and I have a sense of direction, and Porkchop is solid and steady but still able to adapt at the drop of a pick. I thought that was good, the drop of a pick.
Yeah, I like that.
But we all have our confidences and we all have our insecurities too, and those also balance us out. Nolin's insecurities keep me from putting Captain Beefheart style sax on every second of the record. Porkchop's creative insecurities push me to keep the songs rooted and not overcomplicate the parts or the arrangements. And my insecurities about my lack of talent and playing and singing ability makes me push to keep every second of the recording interesting, which pushes Nolin and Porkchop out of their comfort zones. The push and pull is real collaboration.
I think that's well put.
Mm-hmm.
I really do. That's you're of the three of us, you're the only one that can string together sentences. So it's I'm glad you wrote that down. But yeah, I totally agree with that. Never thought about that, but that is true, because we all have our strengths and weaknesses, and in some band situations, the weaknesses you almost can pick on that person, the whole band,
right?
But in this band and really in any form we've ever had, it tends to be like, we all kind of work together, and that's the way I put it. It's very simple, but I think you put it better.
Well, we've always had a weird combination of musicians.
Yeah.
Like, I've never had a band where we all walked in and played the same style of music and all liked the exact same thing. And so the thing that always kind of pulled us together, I mean, the overlaps are obviously there, but to me, like, if the people that I'm playing with like the songs that I write enough to help me play them live, like if you're, that gives a certain level of investment, and I haven't always had those bands. Like, I've had a lot of bands through the years, probably deservedly, that were like, can we just do CCR songs and go get gigs and make money? And I'm like, no, absolutely not. Will not do that. But
WWJD, what would John Fogerty do?
When we come in where, like, my background very much like started out wanting to be a Bob Dylan, and then a whole lot of like this alt country stuff that I played through the years, but also like heavier blues rock and stuff like that. And then you got Porkchop, who's coming out of bluegrass and has played bluegrass for years and years and years, but also like a classic country, an ear for like soul music too is a big part of what you do, Chop.
Mm-hmm.
And then Nolin, like, coming out of school, like classical training, but also like jazz and jazz band, and then also Nolin's like ear for metal, like real heavy music.
Yeah.
And so we've all got these like slight overlaps, but we're all sort of coming from a different direction too. And every band that I've ever been in has been that way. And I think it just adds so much to what we end up getting. You heard that a lot in the Night Terrors episode, and the difference between you playing the song and Trev playing the song, or with the difference between Matt, Jonah, and Scott on drums versus how we ended up doing it with a filing cabinet. Like all that, regardless of the songwriter's name that's on the record, like all of that influence bleeds through. All right, so after everybody left that day, I recorded the drum tracks. We actually did drums after guitar and bass in this instance. Most of the time, you guys were getting a drum track with a guitar track. But in this instance, the drums came after the bass was recorded, so you recorded bass to just guitar and click track. I tried there's a lot of notes in here about this part. I tried a lot of different stuff. I was not happy about it. I was starting to get really frustrated, like trying to come up with new percussion sounds on each track, and there was like a boom chick thing that I really wanted, like a natural boom ch, boom ch, that you naturally hear with the drum kit, and I couldn't find like a good way of accomplishing that. I did not find it on this song either. I got really irritated, and I just played the percussion on the back of the harmonica case. So I've got like a wood, like a harmonica briefcase is pretty much what it is. And so apparently I just pulled that down and played on the back of it. But the thing is, when you're trying to record stuff in the room, and I mentioned this in the last episode, like you don't get the full sound. And so everything I was trying was either dink or it was, just sounded like wet flops. So anyway, that was not fun on this song. It was a bit of a struggle, but the harmonica case sounds pretty good. So I'll let you hear that in isolation. Well, that clip was probably longer than it needed to be, but I was really proud of myself because what I'm playing actually changes. So it's a steady rhythm, unlike just about everything else that's just me copying a guitar riff. This one actually has like a steady flow to it within the song, and then it changes when it goes into the chorus, and changes again when it goes into the solo. Really proud of myself for beating on the back of that harmonica case that one time. I thought the sound was really good, though.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was recording technique or the medium, but I think it sounds better than that Porkchop for President guitar sounded on a Hand of God.
It's got a good sound to it.
I did note in there, I had like a list of things that I tried, and one of the things that was on the list was a box of thumbtacks. And so that box of thumbtacks is it didn't stay in this song, but it will reappear later in the recording process and kind of becomes a core sound of the record. So I was testing it early on, apparently. So we had completed the 3-piece version of this song, drums, bass, and guitar, before we had even figured out how to correctly mic the saxophone, just keeping everybody in line of the chronologically how this was happening. After we got the sax mic dialed in, so this is the day we mentioned before where it's just me and Nolin in here figuring this out. So once we figured out how to mic the sax, this was March 3rd, Nolin recorded a sax take. You should note that this sax take was done after he had done 2 full takes of Night Terrors that ended up being on the record. So this is the first saxophone take from Shadow.
Warm your feet by the fire, your eyes dance, wonder and desire. But the path ahead is winding, narrow, and I know you don't want me for the shadow. You walked away.
So the sax is pushed up a little bit in the mix there, but really like light, really mellow. Nolin, do you remember, I guess I should say, was that an intentional approach, or was that you just completely out of steam after 2 takes of Night Terrors?
Well, probably a bit of both, but on that song in particular, yeah, I try to hold back a little bit. It doesn't need to be blaring in your ear.
Absolutely. It does have a nice, like, it does have a nice feel to it, and it definitely is breathy in a way that I think is really interesting. Apparently, though, we didn't like it. So we tried again on March the 19th. So on March 19th, we reached the halfway point of recording the album. So we had 5 songs that we had already done, and we sort of took a couple of weeks and went back and said, what can we tighten up? Like, what can we fix from those? What have we learned to do better? And so one of the things that we went back and did again was a second take on the saxophone. So this was the second version.
Wipe the dreams from your eyes. Our star begins her journey across the sky. You greet the day.
So definitely comes through with a little more bite there.
Yeah.
I love the way, and this is a thing you're really good at, Nolin, like weaving in and out of the vocals like that.
Yeah.
Where it's like you sort of disappear, and then in waves it kind of comes back in. That takes a long time. You know, we talked about this a good bit, but there aren't charts or anything written down. You're doing all of this, you know, kind of out of your head, and it takes a while. One of the first processes when we're learning a new song, and a lot of these recordings were this way, is for you to just kind of get an ear for where the lyrics are coming in and where these parts are happening, to be able to find your groove and find your way of weaving in and out of there. But, you know, not to blow too much smoke for you either, there's not a lot of that is a thing that you're sort of developing, like your style of playing. There's not a lot of that in popular music, where that you'll hear it with guitars, where guitars weave in and out of the vocals like that. But as far as how you do that, like, there's not a lot of examples of a saxophone doing that. And especially considering we're doing original songs, like, I think it takes a lot of creativity to be able to come up with those parts that don't step all over everything that's happening and add texture without making the saxophone the focal point of everything that's going on.
You know, one of the things that we've heard Nolin compare the saxophone to, sound-wise, tone and the way it's played, and I think this is the only time I can think about how an instrument does that, is a fiddle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whether it's country music or bluegrass, a lot of times you'll hear a fiddle come in and weave around those lyrics. Mandolin sometimes too in bluegrass, but specifically fiddle. And I know that you've often had a comparison for the saxophone to the fiddle, so I can definitely hear that. That's almost sounds normal to me, because I'm around bluegrass all the time.
Yeah, gospel music too. Like, you have a slow, like, sultry song.
Yeah.
You'll have a little bit of, violin over top of it.
Yeah.
Something to fill in that space.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, we didn't keep it. I think the big thing is, like, and we did this a lot, is it adding anything?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, is it bringing anything else to the table here that we're not getting otherwise? And honestly, like, even though you do such a good job of weaving in and out, like, is it pulling away from the lyrics? Is it making the lyrics less of a focus of the song? Should we have space there to process what was just said before we get to the next thing that's being said? And that song also has this, like, a meditative drone because of that tuning and that open D just kind of running throughout. And it doesn't, like, that song kind of, I don't know a good way of putting it. Like, it's kind of like a lot of blues tunes will just sit in a chord and just kind of sit there. Like, the song doesn't move. It doesn't move until it gets to the chorus. It kind of just stays in this one place. And the sax brings a natural, going back to the dendrological method, the sax brings, because it's the branches, it brings a movement. Whereas I feel like in that song, the movement was the opposite of everything else that was happening.
I think that drone is kind of what you're talking about. It doesn't sound like a drone would keep a piece of music moving, but it does.
Yeah.
In that type of way.
We did keep this take for a long time, though. So there are a lot of demo mixes that had this saxophone in it. This is one of the songs, like, right there towards the end, where we sort of had our last meeting of, like, what are we, like, does anything need to be tightened up? Are we happy with what's going on here? Where there were a couple of tunes right there at the end where we decided to actually nix the saxophone.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think it was interesting. I never did a backing vocal take with the original mic setup. So we've talked about this on the podcast already, but we got to a spot in October after all of the recording that was done, and we all thought we were finished with the record, where I was like, I'm going to go back and redo all the vocals with a different microphone, and I had good headphones then too. And I think it was kind of a turning point. This was one of the weakest original vocal takes, which is probably means that it had a big influence on deciding to redo the vocals, which I kind of think is strange, because I do think this is one of the songs that I sing the best, as far as that goes. Like, I think it works really well with my voice. But the early versions did not have a great vocal take, and they didn't have any backing vocals on them at all. And I wonder if I had a hard time singing them, and that's why I just didn't do them. It did work wonders with the final take, though. Once I was able to hear more clearly through the dynamic, through the good headphones, I went back to the vocal approach that I used for the first time on those like official demos way back when. There's a huge Crosby, Stills, and Nash influence in these backing vocals. Like, that was in my head the whole time I was recording this. I think there's probably a little bit in the music too, like, folk rock is what they would have called that at that point in time. And the indie folk stuff that I named off before, or British folk like Nick Drake, but Crosby, Stills, and Nash and the way they stack those vocal harmonies. All right, so let's listen to it. I think I isolated all of the vocal harmonies here, so this should just be voice.
You ran to me, you were quaking with fright, you looked to me to make everything all right. But the path ahead is winding and narrow, and I know you don't want me for a shadow. And the path ahead is winding and narrow, and I know you don't want me for a shadow.
It's kind of cool hearing them like that in isolation, because you hear a lot more going on than you hear with the music in the background. So if you're keeping score at home, I think what I did there is I stacked a third on top of the lead, and then I put the fifth underneath, so I'm singing one line lower than the lead and one line higher than the lead. But it comes through nice and like it builds that full chord. Like, there's a lot of thickness to that, right? The reverb really stands out to me too. I spent a ton of time trying to find like this perfect reverb sound for these quieter songs. And the thing is, like, you hear it so much in isolation there. If you think about Night Terrors, most of the reverb that is surrounding all of the instruments, especially my vocals, is buried in all of the rest of the noise of the song. But with something like this that's so stripped down, you can hear it. You can hear the reverb really well. And to me, like, most digital reverb that you're going to hear sounds fake. Like, it sounds fake. A lot of times I hear songs on the radio and I'm like, God, they just drench that in BS digital reverb all over the place. What you want reverb to sound like is the space of the room that you're in. Like, that's what natural reverb comes from the recording space. You're not going to get big reverberations in a shed the size of this shed. There's some natural reverberations on the recordings. But I went through 120 settings in Adobe Audition and tested all of them out, and then found like 15 that I thought were okay, and then like changed the amount that I was using to really dial that back. I think at this point, like on this song, this is a huge leap for me vocally, especially with the confidence, right? And this song, it is the vocals. Like, I think more so than any other song on this record, they are the thing that carries this song throughout. And I knew unless I was going to let this song that meant a ton to me fall flat, like, I really had to nail that. They were going to be pushed up in the mix. And so I put a lot of time into this. But also, I think the results, like, showed me that I could do a thing that before I did not know that I could do. So on this one, even the production really like landed exact like this, the thing from the beginning. Like I wanted it to sound like the songs were coming from inside of the listener's head. I had to work so hard on this song because it's so sparse and so bare to achieve all of that. And once I kind of found it, then it became a pattern for these other songs later in the record that kind of had a similar vibe to them in those like up and down waves between the heavier songs and the quieter songs. I think this song's got a great use of space. The way that the instruments were panned out, because there's so few of them, I could hear so much better what was going on, and how moving something to the right speaker a little more or the left speaker a little more changed the overall feel of the song. All right, well, that's about enough of that. So let's dive in. Let's go ahead and play the final take. This is from Fall Down Trees' debut album, Night Terrors. This is the final master of the third track, Shadow.
When you awake, wipe the dreams from your eyes. Our star begins her journey across the skies. You greet the day, warm your feet by the fire. Your eyes dance with wonder and desire. But the path ahead is winding and narrow, and I know you don't want me for a shadow. You walked away into the forest, reaching arms where the ravens hide breadcrumbs for a lark. And I reached for you too, but then quickly turned away. So small, so helpless, so unafraid. But the path ahead is winding and narrow, and I know you don't want me for a shadow. Once upon a time, you sat beneath the trees at play, and the mantis landed on your knee to pray. You ran to me, you were quaking with fright. You looked to me to make everything alright. But the path ahead is winding and narrow, and I know you don't want me for a shadow. And the path ahead is winding and narrow, and I know you don't want me for a shadow.
From Fall Down Trees' debut album Night Terrors, that was Shadow. first of all, definitely did not get the squeaks out of there. You can hear them, but they sound real. Like they sound like they fit in the song. They're not like piercing my eardrums. So I'm okay with that. All in all, like one of my, like I said, Night Terrors is probably my favorite like creative achievement on the record. This is probably just my favorite, like the most special song I think that I've written, and I really love what we got out of it there in the end. That bird's hanging out right on the edge of the shed for us. All right, any final thoughts from you guys before we head out of here?
Well, this song is so simplistic in its approach, and over the years, whether we're doing cover songs or whether we're doing original songs, I wouldn't say that we're not very complex people, but this is probably the most simple song that we have musically that we have ever played, I think, and it's such a change, but the lyrics are so strong, and I think that it puts the lyrics out there on parade, so to speak.
Yeah, I mentioned this before, but usually the more complex the music, the more simple the lyrics, because the music was written first. This is definitely one where I'm sure that, I was all in those lyrics and just let the music carry what was going on.
Yeah, I'll agree with Chop. It's probably one of the most catchy tunes, I think, me personally. And especially, like, that guitar solo. I know you said you took a while to, get it down. It's probably one of the nicest guitar solos on the entire album. At least I could sit there and listen to that all day. And it kind of has that little Middle Eastern, like, sitar vibe that we kind of play with in other songs that you'll hear later.
Absolutely. Yeah. Arabian Nights. That's the harmonic minor scale, right?
I think
how
so.
we get that?
Yeah.
That guitar solo, like, it's really hard to build a solo in the middle of your rhythm guitar or, your finger-picked guitar. Like, that's not an easy thing to do.
No.
And it's easier when you're doing a folk song or something where, it's kind of laid out in that way. But that one, I'm coming from a different tuning and everything, and so it's really like guess and check. That opening lick, though, that da-na-na-na-na with the open strings or whatever, that still gets me when I play it. Like, it just feels like you feel a reverberation. It's like magic, man. You feel like this reverberation in the guitar when you hit those notes. And anyway, I do know there's no telling how much time I sat just finger picking that over and over and over again, changing one note until I got it somewhere close to where I wanted it to be. There's still a little variation in it, but most of that variation is in the very end of that solo. Well, thank you folks for listening to the Does It Make a Sound podcast. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with episode 4, The Modern Prometheus. This one, we're going to get back to more complex arrangements. We're going to start having some real fun in the studio. We may even have a couple of special guests make an appearance for that one. But in the meantime, please like, subscribe, and review the show on your favorite podcasting platform. Stay up to date with Does It Make a Sound and Fall Down Trees by following Fall Down Trees on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. We're going to have links for all of this in the description of the podcast. As independent artists, we need champions to spread the word about our work. So if you find value in our music or in this podcast, please also share it with your friends on your social media channels too. That's more valuable to us than any advertising we could ever afford, and we're forever in your debt for it. Does It Make a Sound and Fall Down Trees are proud partners with Guttersville Records, a collective of independent artists working together to be heard in this noisy digital space. So please like and subscribe to Guttersville channels too. Make sure you listen to all of the music that's coming out on our little indie label. And thank you once again for listening to Does It Make a Sound and for all of your support. For Porkchop and for Nolin, I'm Dustin Owens.
Timber! And I know you